Next, Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about the controversy over reclassifying the former planet Pluto as a comet. New York's American Museum of Natural History, where this talk was held, was the first public institution to adopt this position. This program is about an hour 35 minutes.
Just kidding, C-SPAN. Just testing the microphone. Can I have a little more volume on that, if I may? Thank you. Testing. More. Testing. There we go. Pluto. It was an ugly scene. January 22nd, 2001. That was the night. Actually, that was the morning. I woke up, came to my office. There were some uncountable number of voicemail messages on my telephone. That morning. The phone was ringing. Why? The New York Times had a page one story proclaiming, Pluto not a planet, only in New York. Where'd that come from? This is January 22nd, 2001. What happened just 2 days before then? Tell me. Inauguration of George W., okay? You'd think the whole page one would be filled with stories on the transition to power. Why not? They were still counting dimpled chads in Florida. You'd think that should be enough content to fill the page. I have a mock-up of that page right here. Okay. So here it is, and rightfully so, right at the top, I'll read it to you. On the first day, Bush settles into a refitted Oval Office. So there he goes. It's right there. This is actually the second news day of the inauguration. But there's other items here. There's 37 new cardinals selected by the Pope. Okay, it's big news. A local cardinal, local guy was elevated. Here's one. Iraq rebuilt weapons factories. U.S. officials say. It's fun to see news stories after you know better, you know. It's just kind of, there it is. You know, you got it. What else we got here? California. They had these rolling brownouts at the time, worried about their power supply. New plant in California racing for time. They had to get them ready for the summer. Okay, fine. Then there it goes. Pluto not a planet, only in New York. As she walked past the display of photos of planets at the Rose Center for Earth and Space, Pamela Curtis of Atlanta scrunched her brow, perplexed. There didn't seem to be enough planets. She started counting on her fingers, trying to remember the mnemonic her son had learned in school years ago. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. Then she went along the list. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Quote, I had to go through the whole thing to figure out what was missing, she said. Pluto. Pluto wasn't there. Now I know my mother just served us 9. 9 nothings. The next line, quietly and apparently uniquely among major scientific institutions, the American Museum of Natural History cast Pluto out of the pantheon of planets when it opened the Rose Center for Earth and Space. So, where'd all that come from? First of all, we got accused of just trying to drum up attendance. Just making controversy just for the hell of it, right? Oh yeah, let's just make up a cosmic controversy, whether or not it's true, just to get people in the front door. Fact is, that exhibit had been that way for a year. We didn't open in 2001, we opened in 2000, February, okay? It had been that way for a year. So the New York Times came late in this one. So, let's back up. Let's just back up. It's the 1990s. The museum had just finished its new dinosaur halls, the entire fourth floor of this museum, filled with dinosaurs. Attendance was on the rise. Yet attendance at the Hayden Planetarium was dropping simultaneously with the rise in attendance at the dinosaur halls. Meanwhile, we had rovers on Mars and the space shuttle and Hubble was up. There was no reason for attendance to visit the universe to drop. The institution was deeply concerned, said we got to do something about it. All right, that's when I came in the mid-1990s. We built the staff, we looked at the problem, looked at the state of our understanding of the universe, we started designing exhibits. The exhibit designer, Ralph Applebaum and Associates, perhaps best known for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Worked closely with him, and architects Jim Polshek and partners. So, there we are, laying out the lesson plan. And we notice something. What did we notice? There are objects being discovered in the outer solar system, beyond Neptune, adding to our inventory of what's out there. What do these objects look like? They're kind of small. Pluto's kind of small. What else about them? They're kind of icy. Pluto's kind of icy. What kind of orbits do they have? Well, their orbits are a little weird, like Pluto's orbit. You may know Pluto's orbit is strongly elliptical, by far the most elliptically orbiting planet there is. Called it a planet there for the moment. And so it crosses the orbit of Neptune. No other planet does that to any other planet. So that's odd. Not only that, if you look at the plane in which planets orbit, Pluto is tipped out of that plane by 17 degrees. Everybody else, Mercury is tipped a little too, but not as much as Pluto. Everybody else is kind of right there, a couple of degrees up or down within the plane, what we call the plane of the solar system. So, as these objects start getting discovered, we say to ourselves, well, what are they? What do they represent? What do they mean? This is in the mid-1990s. We know we want to rebuild the facility, so we're looking at trend lines in what science is doing. And in those trend lines, we say, something's going on out there, let's take a closer look. We take a closer look, and we find out that what is being discovered is a zone in the solar system predicted to be there at mid-century. A solar system theorist named Gerard Kuiper hypothesized that beyond the orbit of the farthest most large planet, if there's not another large planet out there, then there'd be the leftovers from the formation of the solar system that never got gravitationally vacuumed up to become part of that large planet. If there's no large planet, it would just still be there. So he said, maybe there's a reservoir of icy bodies out there. We went 45 years before such an object was discovered. We needed the biggest telescopes in the world, biggest optical telescopes. Right now they're in Hawaii. The Keck telescope was brought to bear on this problem. We discovered, we got people who do that. I wasn't, we got peeps. Colleagues discovered the Kuiper belt. Discovered it. So we said to ourselves, maybe Pluto is not the 9th out of 9 planets. Maybe Pluto is a member of a new class of object, predicted to be there at mid-century. So let us create a display that captures this fact. Most museums, all museums that present the planets, do it in a way that you first learned it in elementary school. There's a panel, there's a wall, and there are panels. So the first one is Mercury, and it gives you the data on Mercury, how big it is, what it's made of, what's the orbital period. Then you go to Venus, and then Earth, and then there it is. Mercury through Pluto. It is an enumeration of objects sitting there for you to memorize. And we saw an educational and scientific opportunity to rethink how we're going to deliver the solar system to you. And we said to ourselves, that's not how we're going to do it. There's too much else to learn, to understand, to relate to about the solar system, rather than thinking of it as an enumeration of objects. So instead, what we did was create a new sort of family photo of the solar system, organizing objects by similar properties. We took Pluto and said, Pluto, you look much more like these other objects than you or these other objects look like anybody else in the solar system. You're going to be a new group for us. There's the Kuiper belt of icy bodies. There it is, with Pluto a prominent member among them. Next, we had the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. They're big, they're low density, they have rings, they have huge moon systems. That's a group. They have more in common with each other than any one of them has with anything else. That's kind of what you want for a classification scheme. That's how classification schemes work at their best. We have the rocky planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. We're all small, we're all dense, we're all rocky, similar density. That was a group. The asteroid belt, separating the rocky planets from the gas giants. And last out there, the Oort cloud. We call it a cloud. It is a zone of comets that completely surrounds the solar system, hence the word cloud, as distinct from belt, which is slightly flattened in the plane. The Oort cloud is a reservoir of comets that extends halfway to the nearest stars. So these are communities of objects. That's how we presented the solar system. At no time did we count planets. In fact, we devalued the very meaning of the word planet because it wasn't very useful to us. If I say to you today, I just discovered a planet orbiting another star, you're going to have to play 20 questions with me. You're going to say, was it big? Is it small? Is it gaseous? Does it have rings? And by the time we're done, you've asked me 20 questions. Why? Because the word planet was not useful to you. It was no longer a discriminating term. If you have bookshelves, I can say one of 5 things and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I say, bring me the book, bring me the encyclopedia, bring me the dictionary, bring me the paperback, bring me the pamphlet, bring me the DVD, okay, or the, what else? Bring me the files. I don't say, bring me the wood pulp, which would then apply to everything there. We have words that distinguish one object from another, which creates great utility in the act of communicating and delivering information. So, what we wanted, but were not audacious enough to create, was a new lexicon to account for what we now know about the objects in the solar system. That's what we did. So when the New York Times headline said, Pluto not a planet, only in New York, it's not actually true. And in all fairness to the author of that article, Kenneth Chang, upstart science writer, we're friends actually. In all fairness to him, he didn't write that title. As you know, these media places, they have the title people. They come in, they browse what you sketch, and then they give it a title, as inflammatory as possible. And so he knows that nowhere did we say there are now only 8 planets. But I'll tell you, as the media storm unfolded, they kept coming, sticking microphones in my face saying, so how many planets are there? They kept trying to get me to say, oh, there are only 8 planets, and make that the soundbite, but it never came out of my mouth, not ever. Okay? Because that's not what we did. If you want to go there, you got to watch out, because yes, Pluto's small, but consider this. Jupiter is more bigger compared with Earth than Earth is compared with Pluto. So if we were like Jupiterians, all right, no such word actually, Jovian. If we were Jovians and we were asked how many planets are there in the solar system, you know what we would say? 4. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And the rest is just debris. All right, so Earth is smaller than Jupiter's red spot, okay? It's a storm on its weather system. Been going for 300 years, at least. Earth fits nicely right inside the red spot. Jupiter was slammed by a comet back in 1994. Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. This is a comet that used to be one piece, and during one of the flybys of Jupiter, Jupiter's tidal forces of gravity broke it into multiple segments, 24 segments. Each piece fell in separately as Jupiter rotated, and it had like pock marks, one right after another. The pock marks were bigger than Earth, okay? So it's not about counting planets here. It was never about counting planets. So, but I was so angered by this, with all these microphones going in my face. I wanted to just have a reply that would just send them off happy. So here's what I wanted to say. So Dr. Tyson, are there only 8 planets in the solar system? I want to say, yep. Pluto wasn't big enough to make it in New York. That's what I wanted to say. We kicked it out. Manhattan was just too big for Pluto. I wanted to say that just to give them something to chew on. So, my life was completely upended that day because I was fielding inquiries from the public. My boss called me, okay? Who's my boss? You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you. My boss is the provost of this august institution. The provost is the chief academic officer of any place of academic study. All universities have provosts. If they don't have a provost, nobody's learning anything there. Let's just keep that in mind. That is the head of the academic organization of an institution. The provost calls me up that day. I was still relatively new. I'd only been hired a few years earlier. Okay, kind of young, you know. What did he say to me? He said, Neil, he's trying to protect the institution's reputation. And here we are scattered all over page 1. He said, what did you do? He said, did you decide this by yourself? I said, no, we got people. We got people. It was unanimous, in fact. There was a committee. We got people. I got people. But not only that, we're not stupid. Okay, 1999, we saw the writing on the wall. We said, and locally, one of us is sort of a solar system expert, and that's Steve Soder, a colleague of mine, friend and colleague. So he would have sort of deeper insight into the solar system up front than the rest of us would. Not that we couldn't acquire some insight, but we said, let's do this professionally, I mean, in full-blown style. So we invited in the world's experts on this subject and conducted a panel, a Pluto panel. Took place 10 years ago, March, in the main auditorium. It was to debate what was going on with Pluto. And on that panel, I had one of the co-discoverers of the first Kuiper Belt object. Okay, so here's somebody who's looking in the outer solar system. I got someone who's head of the committees that worry about nomenclature in astronomy. I got the biographer of the discoverer of Pluto. You know where he's going to land on that issue, okay? I got all the right people. And we sat back and listened. Listened to the strength of arguments. Listened to the data being brought forth on those arguments. And we didn't even have to caucus at the end of this. It was clear that Pluto's days as the 9th planet were numbered. No pun intended. So, one day we still have the tapes for that debate. One day we'll figure out a way to put it online, and so you can all relive the history with us. We recount. There's a lot of that dialogue recounted in the Pluto files. I should put a copy of the book right here, shouldn't I? Is that how you're supposed to do that? So the camera always has to look at the book. That's how that works. Learned that from Andy Rooney. Right there it is. Put it right there. There. I just stand next to it like that. See, now you got it. No. By the way, the American Museum of Natural History is my host home institution, and I made an arrangement, an agreement with the upper level administration that whatever of these, however many books you buy tonight, all of the royalties that would go to me are going back to the museum. So it's all being folded back into the programs here. So you can buy with abandon at the checkout line. I won't gain from it. So let's back up in time. 1930. That's when Pluto was discovered by Clyde Tombaugh, homegrown farm boy from the Midwest. Clyde Tombaugh. He actually took on the search for Planet X, launched by Percival Lowell. This is Lowell of the New England Lowells, moneyed, tweedy. Couldn't find a picture of him without a tweed jacket on. He found a mountain in Arizona where there's very low humidity. Humidity is bad for observations from a telescope. Built an observatory, called it the Lowell Observatory, and launched the search for Planet X. Planet X was this fabled perturber of Neptune. The orbit of Neptune, the then farthest most planet, was not following what you'd expect it to do from Newton's laws of gravity. So you're left with two choices. Either Newton's laws of gravity fail at this distance from the sun, but we were not quick to give it up because Newton's laws were working. They were working for centuries. So what's the alternative? Maybe there's a yet to be discovered other object out there whose gravity was influencing Neptune, yet you hadn't reckoned it in your equations yet. Meanwhile, Newton's laws would all just still be fine. Thus was born Planet X. Percival Lowell wanted to find Planet X. You do the arithmetic. It's more than arithmetic. You do the math to find out. You say, if Neptune is doing this and it should be doing that, then the object should be there. So train your telescopes in that direction and look for it. They looked over there, couldn't find it. Couldn't find Planet X. So it should be there. Looked there, couldn't find it. All right, what's going on here? Well, Clyde Tombaugh comes in a little later and says, let's do a systematic survey of the night sky rather than these targeted searches. Let's just look at everything. And he looks at everything and he discovers Pluto. The first planet discovered by an American. So Americans have a certain investment in this object. Not only that, if you look at the sizes given for Pluto right when it was discovered, it was assumed that it was Planet X, first of all. Second, if it was Planet X, it would need a mass and a gravity commensurate with that of Neptune. So the earliest estimates for Pluto's size was an object the size of Neptune. Over the years, as measurements got more and more refined, our best estimates for the size of Pluto got littler and littler and littler and littler. The size of Pluto didn't settle out until the 1970s. And when it did, there are 7 moons in the solar system bigger than Pluto, including Earth's moon. Fully half the Pluto lovers I've ever told that to did not know that fact. That's because the Pluto lobby does not lead with that information. They hold that back. You got to like dig it out of them. Oh, the moon is bigger. Oh, okay, and so is Ganymede and Titan, and you just go on down the list. But like I said, I want to make a thing about size because we would lose that one to Jupiter. But still, Pluto lovers, many did not know that. Who here did not know that there's 7 moons? See? Raise your hand. Did not know. They never told you. They never told you. Never told you. I'm telling you. 1930, Pluto's discovered. By the way, the size of Pluto was dropping precipitously, according to our best estimates. There's a tongue-in-cheek paper written in the late 1970s, and it just looked at the size of Pluto and made a plot, a graph. The size of Pluto according to the year that an estimate was made for it. And the size was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then they extrapolated into the future, and so the title of the article was "The Pending Disappearance of Pluto." And it goes through the x-axis in 1984, you know? So they were worried that Pluto would disappear completely. So I've got the abstract and the actual published plot of the paper in the Pluto files. So it's fun to read that, because the authors obviously knew Pluto was not going to disappear, but it's just fun to watch this trend line. It sort of pokes fun at the process of, or has fun with the process of what it took to get the size of Pluto correctly. It's so far and so little and so dim. So, here we are. I'm getting mail. After that article appeared, I started getting hate mail from like third graders. Pissed off third graders. Like I upset their worldview. Like a third grader has a worldview. You know what I mean? When does that happen? You're a third grader. Like, so why do, and I didn't get this reaction from Europeans. Europeans went, fine, Pluto, demoted, I don't care, you know. Pass the wine, you know, they just had other issues. In Europe, they're cool. In America, people just went ape. And I trying to understand that, and I said, well, how do I come to understand this? What's going on? And you look back, you comb the history books, and you discover that in 1930, Walt Disney first sketches a dog. A dog that would get the name of Pluto. Pluto the dog, the Disney dog, and Pluto the cosmic object have the same tenure in the hearts and minds of Americans. An American didn't name the cosmic object. We discovered it, we didn't name it. We couldn't have named it, it turns out. No way an American could have named that object Pluto. It was named by an 11-year-old girl in Cambridge, England. A very connected 11-year-old girl. Her father was like head of the Cambridge Library, who was buddies with the astronomer royal, and so she had just learned Roman mythology in her class and heard about this new discovery. It made all of the world news in America, and thought that Pluto is like the god of the underworld. It's sort of dark and far, and you don't want to go there, and said, wouldn't Pluto be a good name for it? And so it worked its way up the ranks, and it stuck. And thus the announcement came. An American could not have named it Pluto. First, we're not that educated when we're 11 years old, okay? Yes, let me reflect on my Roman mythology I just learned in class today. No, well, maybe we were back then, I don't know. But there's a stronger reason why it would have never come out of our brains. Because in the 1920s, right on up through the early 30s, there was a heavily advertised, widely marketed mineral laxative called Pluto water with the slogan, when nature won't, Pluto will. So when a cosmic object is discovered, you're just not thinking the word Pluto. I'm sorry. It's not happening. It's just not. Venetia Burney, that's the name of the little girl. I mean, she's like 80-something now, 87. Still alive, by the way. See, there's an interview with her online. We give the link in the book. There's an interview with her. You can hear her talk about how she named Pluto. Someone made a sound? Was that? Okay. So I've come to the conclusion, the following conclusion. About what age do you first learn about the planets? You're like in first, second, or third grade, something like that, right? About right? What grade are you in? Third grade. Did you learn about the planets this year or last year?
Mostly this year.
Mostly this year. So third grade, that's the grade. Okay? Now, when you're a kid, when you're an average kid, that's the age you're watching cartoons. And like I said, in America, we haven't learned our Roman mythology yet. So when you first learn the planets and they start giving you because they're only teaching it as an enumeration of objects. And here they go. Ready? Mercury. That's just a name. It doesn't mean winged messenger from ancient Rome. It's just a word. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Pluto! Oh, that's the dog. Oh my God. And right at that moment, you get genetically, it's painted into your brain cells, this connection, and it stays with you your whole life. Admit it. Unless you have another accounting for this, I have no other accounting for why Americans cared so much. And I have evidence from adults that I will read to you that supports this contention. By the way, I work here at the museum. I do astrophysics, but I share the corridors with colleagues of mine who are zoologists, people who study the rest of the animal kingdom, okay? Including humans. We have anthropologists who study humans. So everything that walks, slithers, moves on this earth, we got somebody who's an expert in it, okay? So I have a certain osmotic sensitivity to the animal kingdom for working here, which led me to question. This has nothing to do with anything, by the way. Just hang with me for a minute. I'm there trying to solve this problem, and I say, how is it that Pluto is Mickey's dog, yet Mickey is not Pluto's mouse? This disturbed me. There's some disturbance in the space-time continuum of the mammalian order of things. That's not right. I would not have otherwise been distracted by this, except that I work here. I had to get to the bottom. I called up Disney. I said, so what's going on here? I got the answer. I don't know if you know the answer. I got the answer. You ready? I'm telling you. In the Disney pantheon of cartoon characters, not the ones that they bought later, like Winnie the Pooh. They just bought Winnie the Pooh. They didn't invent Winnie. I'm talking about the ones that they sketched out of their own cartoon labs. In that pantheon, if you're an animal who wears clothes, you can own other animals who do not. That's it. Simple as that. So Mickey's got the gloves, the pant, the short, whatever he wears. I don't know what they're called, but he's wearing clothes. Okay? Pluto's butt naked. Pluto walks on all fours. Pluto doesn't speak. Pluto lives in a doghouse. Goofy walks bipedally, wears clothes, pays rent in a house. That's how that works. I know you were burning to know that, but I can't keep that to myself. So here we are, my emails coming in, fielding inquiries. I'm trying to answer to my boss. He doesn't believe me. I say, look, I had a committee, it was a consensus. He didn't even believe me. He went calling around other people. He called the provost, because provost talked to provost, at Princeton, who happened to be an astrophysicist, a world-famous astrophysicist. Now, I spent 13 years at Princeton before I came here. So they all know me down there. They know who, what I do, how I do it. They called him up and said, what do you make of this thing that our guy Tyson just did? And he said, provost at Princeton said, whatever Tyson did, that's correct. Just let it go. That's it. Just chill out, let it be what that is. That'll turn out to be correct. And so I'm happy to announce that 6 years later, that would have been now 5 years later, we're the first institution to bring this story public. It had been percolating in the scientific lounges up until then. We were just the first to make a public stink about it. Well, actually, we didn't make the stink. The Times made the stink. So what's happening over that time? More Kuiper Belt objects are being discovered. 2 of them larger than Pluto. Icy bodies in the outer solar system. If you're not going to call those planets, and they're bigger than Pluto, that pulls Pluto down into whatever you're going to call them, doesn't it? You can't have Pluto sitting up above you and you're bigger than Pluto. So this threw the whole planet definition into question. Why was there such controversy anyway? Have you ever seen scientists fighting like this? By the way, the hate mail that I got was not just from elementary school children. I got some from colleagues too, all right? Everybody was choosing up sides. Everybody. So, over those years, the Kuiper Belt is fleshing out, giving more ammo to those who want to think of the Kuiper Belt as its own entity. So here we are, the professional international community of astrophysicists say, we've got to address this problem. We've got to now define planet. You might be thinking, wasn't the word defined before this? No. The word planet had not been unambiguously defined since ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, they looked up at the night sky, they saw some objects wandered against the background sky, and others stayed put. What's the Greek word for wanderers? Planetes, the wanderers. That's where we get the word planet. It's derived from the Greek. There were 7 wanderers: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the Sun, and the Moon. Unambiguous planets. Everybody agreed those wander against the background sky. By the way, the fact that the word wander was used tells you no one really understood what they were doing. If you knew what they were doing and why, you wouldn't say they were wandering, right? So it was a statement of our scientific ignorance of the day. So these 7 wanderers, the names for our 7 days of the week are traceable to those 7 wanderers through Roman and Norse mythology. So Saturday is from what? Saturn. Who didn't know that? Saturn comes from Saturday. Didn't know that, right? Isn't that cool? How about Sunday? What? The sun, thank you. See, this is an easy game we're playing here, okay? Okay, let's have one a little harder. Moon Day. How about that? What, you got that one? Has your chance to redeem yourself. The moon, yeah, moon day is so they're all traceable. The 7 planets. All right. And everybody was happy with that until Copernicus comes along. 1543. Is that the year? Mid-1500s. He says to himself, wait a minute. This is Nikolai Copernicus, Polish astronomer, mathematician. Wait a minute. Maybe Earth is not what's in the center of all this motion. He was throwing the geocentric worldview into question. He said maybe the sun is in the middle, and these other objects go around the sun, including Earth. And maybe the moon goes around Earth. So at that moment, the planet count changed. We lost the sun and the moon. 7 minus 2 is 5. And we gained what? Earth. So it went down to 5, up 1 to 6. Planet count changed. But no one defined planet at that point. It was just kind of, if it goes around the sun, let's just kind of agree that it's a planet. Let's just agree. But no one sat down and wrote a formal definition for it. But it was okay because nothing threw it into question until 1801. 1801, January 1st. Telescopes are getting bigger and better over all these decades, from Galileo, now the 400th anniversary of his telescope being used to look at the night sky. And in celebration of that, we are in the International Year of Astronomy, by the way. If you didn't know it, there's 10 days in April where it is the goal, whether or not we achieve it, to get all 6.5 billion people in the world to at least once look through a telescope. That's the International Year of Astronomy this year. That's going to be hard, okay? Going to be, particularly in New York, you put your telescope on the street. Hey, you want to look through this? People. Where was I before I interrupted myself? What was I talking about? 1801. Somebody's paying attention right here. She's paying attention right here in the front row. 1801. 1801. A new planet is discovered, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. There's a big gap there. We've always known that's the gap between the rocky small planets and the gas giants. There's a gap. People were looking hard in that gap. They found a new planet. And they named it Planet Ceres. Ever heard of Planet Ceres? C-E-R-E-S? Raise your hand if you've never heard of Planet Ceres. Never heard of it. Big news back in 1801. Where were you? Okay? Named for the Roman goddess of sort of grain and farming and harvest. That's, in fact, the root word to today. The word we use is cereal. Cereal comes from Ceres. Okay? An element discovered on the periodic chart of elements shortly after that object got named was named after that object. Okay? That's cerium. C-E-R-E-I-U-M. Cerium. Something like that. Ends in I-U-M. I got that right. So, everyone was excited. They looked harder again. They found another planet. And then another. And then another. And then another. I've got books from the early 1800s that list the planet count at like 13 planets. What's going on? This was getting out of hand. Dozens of them started showing up. You're scraping bottom for names now. You need a Roman god or goddess and need a symbol and what's going on? They paused, took a step back and said, well, how big are these objects? They're small. Smaller than any object they'd ever discovered. How do they orbit? Well, they kind of all orbit together in this sort of belt around the sun. Realized they weren't discovering new planets. They discovered a new swath of real estate in the solar system that today we call the asteroid belt. And overnight, the planet count dropped from whatever it was in the high 20s, whatever was the last one where people said, this is ridiculous, something else is happening here, and went back down to just Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, by then Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. Is that right? Yeah, Uranus. Neptune hadn't been discovered yet. Okay? So, where have I heard that story before? Right? We've had, Ceres was just the first of a new class of object, wasn't it? So, the woman we brought in, who was the co-discoverer of the first Kuiper Belt object, she actually discovered the second Kuiper Belt object, didn't she? What was the first? Pluto. Discovered by Clyde Tombaugh, 1930. Now, this thing about planet names, by the way. Oh, I should tell you, just because we're here, we're here, why not? Planets are named after Roman gods, in case you hadn't figured that out. As an homage to Roman mythology that so graces our night sky. But how about the Greek mythology? We want to sort of homage to them too. So in fact, the moons of planets are named for the assorted Greek characters in the life of the Greek god who's the counterpart to the Roman god after whom the planet is named. Got that? Who didn't get that? Be honest. There you go. We got one honest person. The rest of you are lying. All right, here you go. Here's an example. Jupiter, one of Jupiter's moons is Ganymede. Ganymede was the manservant of Zeus. And Zeus is the Greek counterpart to Jupiter. Because these gods sort of correspond with each other. Like, if you had the lightning bolt, they both had a lightning bolt. If one was more powerful, they have correspondence with each other. So, planet moons are named after Greek characters. No shortage of characters to draw upon. Because these mythological gods, they all had very complicated social lives. So there's no shortage. William Herschel, an English astronomer, was actually the first person to ever discover a planet. He discovered Uranus, actually quite by accident. Discovered it as the next planet after Saturn. Now, just no one ever discovered a planet before. There are no rules and regulations about what to do. What to do. In fact, he was in denial of this fact. He would read the writings, and the writings of others. He says, by the way, people had discovered comets before. No one ever discovered a planet. He says, this is a curious comet. It refuses to show a tail. What are we to make of this comet? It's a planet, okay? That's what he discovered. Now, like any good scientist, it's time to name the thing. What do you name it after? You name it after your funder. That's if you're a good scientist, this is what you do. Keep your funders happy so they keep writing your check. So he names it after King George. So for a while there, the sequence of planets were Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and George, okay? Now, I don't know about you, but there's something wrong with that. I can't. Now, the Brits are powerful. They're economically, militaristically powerful, politically powerful. You can't just say, we're not going to call it George when they discovered the object. You need some quid quo pro there. So, what ultimately happened was, clearer heads prevailed. A Roman god was introduced as the name of the object, but you had to keep the British happy somehow. So, the lone exception among all the planets is that the moons of Uranus are not named after Greek characters, they're named after Shakespearean characters, fictional Shakespearean characters, as an homage to the Brits for having discovered the first planet. So, Uranus has Puck, Oberon, Titania, Portia, not the car Porsche, I'm talking Portia, Miranda. In fact, my daughter's name is Miranda. And I'd known Miranda because I'd known the moon, and I'm far less literate than my wife is, but I knew I liked the name Miranda. So I said to her, I like Miranda. What do you think of that if we ever have a girl? She said, oh, Miranda, oh, you mean the heroine in Shakespeare's The Tempest? I said, yeah, that's exactly, yeah. So that's how we name things. So when Pluto's moon was discovered, 1978, Pluto has a moon. You got to find a Greek character in the life of Hades, which is the Greek counterpart to Pluto. And so it was named after Charon, who is the ferry boat driver that carried your soul, your dead, unfortunate soul, across the river into Hades. Okay, that's how that played out, in case you were wondering. So let's fast forward to 2006. International Community of Astrophysicists votes. They set up a naming panel because the planet had not been named since ancient Greece. I told you that. That's why there were these fights. That's why people chose up science. Normally, if something's defined, you could argue about the definition, but you're not choosing up sides. The argument is very different once you have a clean definition. We didn't even have a clean definition. So there was a planet definition committee set up. And they said, okay, and I looked at who was on the committee. There were like Pluto lovers on that committee, all right? I saw that. So they came out with a new definition of a planet. And here it comes. You ready? A planet is an object that orbits the sun. Pluto gets a check for that one, yes. And is round. Okay. That's kind of like almost everybody, isn't it? That proposal got voted down by the attending members of that symposium. They said, you got to do better than this. It's got to be more discriminatory than that. The thinking is that, by the way, if you're a rock, if you're just a rock, you have whatever shape you have, you're not round. The reason why you're not round is your own gravity isn't strong enough to make you round. If you're big, there is a size beyond which your own gravity overcomes the structural integrity of the very molecules that shape you. And it puts you into a nice round shape. Earth is round for that very reason. You might say, no, it's not round. We have mountains and valleys and deep parts and high parts, you might say. Excuse me, pause. What is the highest point above Earth's surface that you know? What is it? Mount Everest, how high up is it? In miles, give it to me in miles. 5 miles up. What is the deepest part of Earth's crust? Marianas Trench, how deep is that? 6 miles down. So from the deepest part of Earth's crust to the highest part of Earth's crust is 11 miles. that's less than the length of Manhattan. Yet we're 8,000 miles in diameter. If I shrunk Earth down to the size of a cue ball, it would be the smoothest cue ball ever manufactured. If you had a finger and you reached out and rubbed it across the surface of the Earth, you were a cosmic giant, you would not distinguish what was mountain, valley, ocean, or land, because all of that fluctuation would happen within the thickness of the imprint of your fingerprint. Do you know that the globe, the school globe you have in the classroom, you got one of these globes? You ever run your fingers over it and you feel where the mountain ranges are, the Himalayan mountains and the Rockies? They're lying to you, okay? They are lying. You would not feel that at all. The geologists have been lying to us forever. It's the geologist's fault. It's greatly exaggerated bumps on the globe. In fact, the very extent of our atmosphere on that globe would be thinner than the shellac on that globe. That's the atmosphere we think is of great extent, because we're these little creatures at the bottom of it. But compared to the Earth, it's nothing. Now, I don't even know why I went there, but I had to get that all off my chest. Got nothing to do with Pluto. Where was I? Who's the one paying attention? Where was I? Round, thank you. So, are you round? So, that would mean planet. That category would have things as small as Pluto and as large as Jupiter. Pluto being mostly ice by volume, Jupiter being mostly gas by volume. They would be in the same category. That disturbed me as an educator and as a scientist. The vote was taken. It was turned down. They voted it. They said no. They proposed a new plan. They said, all right, round is good. We like that, but add 2 more criteria. Are you the principal object in orbit around the sun? Pluto is. Pluto gets a check there. It's got a moon. Pluto's got a moon, but it's the principal object. Pluto gets a second check. According to the round criterion, moons would have been planets too. So we would have gone from 9 planets to like 50 planets. All right. Had it only been the first criterion. So second, are you the principal object? Yes. Pluto has 2 checks. Third, do you dominate your orbital zone? Is your orbital zone cleared of debris? No, that's right. Not with Pluto, it's not. That's the whole point. We discovered the Kuiper Belt, littering the orbital zone of Pluto. Pluto, if it was a game show, it would just go, rotate Pluto off the stage. It is no longer a planet. There's a new word for it. It's called a dwarf planet. Pluto gets, quote, demoted to dwarf planet status. Ceres, which is round, the only asteroid that's round, gets elevated to dwarf planet. Before, it was just an asteroid. It's a dwarf planet because it's round, it's the principal object in orbit around the sun, has not cleared its zone. It's in the asteroid belt. There you have it. Okay? So, many people got upset. Oh, by the way, those criteria were voted 90% to 10% in favor. And then it was set into law, into suggested practice by the International Astronomical Union. It's not a labor union, it's just the society, the International Society of Astrophysicists. And so another media frenzy unfolded after that, because we sort of started it, but they finished it. And with sentiment that greatly resonated with what our concerns were, that you needed to do something with Pluto. Pluto lovers were upset by this demotion. And I thought, wait, well, is it really a demotion? Maybe dwarf planet is just a kind of planet. If you drive a compact car, are you thinking, I'm not really driving a car? You're still driving a car. It's just a compact car. So maybe Pluto is still a planet. It's just a dwarf planet. But that didn't fly with the Pluto lovers out there. So this 10% are actually quite vocal. They issued a petition, circulated internationally, and they are likely to show up at these conferences persistently to get Pluto reinstated as a planet. Meanwhile, like I said here, we're not even going there. I'm not counting planets. I don't care how many there are. Doesn't matter. And part of what unfolded in 2006 was this, part of the frenzy was you knew the science hit culture because humorists got a hold of the material. There were cartoons, my favorite of which was by a cartoonist named Chaz Allman. He drew this orb, this Pluto orb, sad face on the street corner, holding out a beggar's cup. I know, and a sign that said, "Victim of downsizing." the cutest. The kids wrote in. There's one, just got to show you this. And we're almost done. We'll go to Q&A real quick. This was the very first letter that came to my office on page 111. Can't see it here, but it's written by a 7-year-old kid. How old are you, by the way? 8.5. That's right. Don't let that half go away. Need that half. I'm waiting for someone who's like 80 to say, "I'm 80.5." You know, I'm just waiting for that. You reach an age, nobody says that. Nobody says that. But it's cool when you're young. Dear Natural History Museum, you are missing planet Pluto. Please make a model of it. This is what it looks like. It is a planet. Love, Will Galmont. Turn to the other page, and he drew a picture of Pluto in crayon, in case I did. So what's funny about this letter is that he just assumed it was just kind of an oversight. We just happened to leave it out. Like, oops, we forgot. Thanks, Will. Like it's like an exhibit typo, you know? So this was back in 2000. This actually predated the New York Times article. So Will Galmont noticed it before the New York Times did. Just make that clear. So what happens is 6 years later, the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, they're now in high school with other sort of hormonal priorities occupying their attention. The next generation of third graders, at the time the actual vote was taken, were already born into an understanding of this controversy. So the letters I got from elementary school kids after 2006 are much more consoling and much more understanding. I lead with one here. Dear Dr. Neil Tyson deGrasse, at first remember all those kids that sent you bad letters? Well, I want to apologize for all the things we were wrong about. We're sorry about giving you mean letters saying we love Pluto but not you. I'm very sorry, it'll be okay. Taylor, age 7. This letter came in spring 2008, so just like 8 months ago. Managed to make the printing deadline. And I got another letter here, another one that just, the kids finally got it. That we knew we were doing something right as educators. Another letter towards the end. Dear Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I know how you feel. We feel the same about Pluto, not being a planet. I am too, but we just have to get over it. That's science. We like to learn about science because science will make you smart. Love, Sadiq, age 8. So there was definitely a shift. I know it's only 2 letters, but trust me, the statistics bear this out. That's why it's called the Pluto Files. I got files on this. The kids finally understood that there's more going on in the solar system than just an enumeration of planets. And with the enumeration of planets, that was a good idea when there's nothing else to talk about. And all they were just dots of light on the night sky. Sure, call them planets. But we know too much about them now to believe that their memorized enumeration has anything to do with science at all. And so while I am strongly opinionated on this matter, I save my pontification for the very last chapter, where I give advice to educators and school teachers and parents and the like. The rest is just simply a celebration of the public's reaction to this scientific controversy. And I'll leave you reading from, there's one more. Okay, this is a letter from Madeline Yost. Dear scientist, and it's scientist, T-E-S-T, I thought that was cute. What do you call Pluto if it's not a planet anymore? If you make it a planet again, then the science books will be right. This letter came early on. If there are people who live there, then they won't exist anymore. Why can't Pluto be a planet? If it's small, that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a planet anymore. Some people like Pluto. If it doesn't exist, then they don't have a favorite planet. Please write back, but not in cursive because I can't read cursive yet. It's the cutest thing, it's the cutest. All right, in the back. By the way, I just came from California. I was in California for like a week. It was fun being there, reading what I'm about to read. Appendix H, California legislation relative to Pluto's planetary status. California Assembly Bill H.R. 36, introduced by Assembly members Keith Richmond, Republican District 38, and Joseph Kankiomila, Democrat. It's bipartisan legislation. And it's full of whereas speak. You know how legislation has whereas. Whereas recent astronomical discoveries, including Pluto's oblong orbit and the sighting of slightly larger Kuiper Belt objects, have led astronomers to question the planetary status of Pluto. Fine, nothing. And whereas the mean-spirited International Astronomical Union decided on August 24th, this legislation is posted that very same day, which meant they were working on this. The mean-spirited IAU decided on August 24th to disrespect Pluto by stripping it of its planetary status and reclassifying it as a lowly dwarf planet. And whereas Pluto was discovered in 1930 by an American, Clyde Tombaugh, at the Lowell Observatory, Arizona, and this discovery resulted in millions of Californians being taught that Pluto was the 9th planet in the solar system. And whereas Pluto, named after the Roman god of the underworld, and affectionately sharing the name of California's most famous animated dog, has a special connection to California history and culture. Culture. Whereas downgrading Pluto's status will cause psychological harm to some Californians who question their place in the universe and worry about the instability of universal constants. I mean, this goes on. No, okay. No, the bill did not pass. However, it was their tax money at work nonetheless, drafting such legislation. There's similar legislation that came out in New Mexico, longtime home of Clyde Tombaugh. Clyde Tombaugh lived out his last days in New Mexico, taught at institutions there. New Mexico, beautiful skies, many observatories are there. You know, the VLA, the Very Large Array telescopes with the dishes, you see it in all the sci-fi movies, a bank of dishes, that's in New Mexico. They have a relationship with their astronomers there. They passed legislation that said, no matter what the astronomers in Prague will tell you, if you step across the border into New Mexico, Pluto is a planet by law. And so they felt strongly about this. So the only difference between the letters I got from grown-ups and those from kids is that the grown-ups spell better, that's all. Otherwise, it's all the emotions just spilling out on the page. And this was catharsis for me, just to get it out of my system, out of my files, to share it with all of you, for you to then perhaps decide for yourself. So thank you for this time and attention you've given. Thank you. My favorite part is Q&A, and we have a microphone here, which you're welcome to come up to. If you don't, no one will hear your question, and there'll be this dead spot in C-SPAN TV, and I'll just be standing there, and no one will know what's going on, but I'll know what's going on. I'll lead off until someone comes up to the mic. Oh, you're there. Okay, bend the mic down. There you go. And remind me again, how old are you?
8.5.
That's right, 8.5. Yes, and what grade are you in?
Third.
Third grade, cool. So what's your question?
Well, I just want to know, what did it feel like when you discovered that Pluto was not a planet? Did you feel like excited or bored or?
That's an excellent question. Here's what I thought, because I remember it. I remember the moment it happened. By the way, Clyde Tombaugh was alive up through the 1990s when we were discovering Kuiper Belt objects. He was like 95, I mean, he was 24 in 1930. So you do the math. You add like 65 years. So the guy was low 90s in the 1990s. Still got around. If there was a conference questioning Pluto's status, he'd be there with his cane. Now, you can't win an argument with a 95-year-old man who has a cane, okay? You just got to let that one go, okay? Not going to be around much longer. Just let it just, and I say that, I mean, I'm not just poking fun. I monitored my email traffic and the activity on, back then before there were blogs, there were chat rooms. And I monitored that. And up until he died, there was like kind of a low-level discussion about whether Pluto should be a planet. Practically the minute he died, it shot up. And people felt a little more brave about speaking of this now that he wouldn't be around to react to it. I expressed this point, and someone who was friends with the Tombaugh family, friends with Clyde Tombaugh's widow, said to me, came right up and said, his widow is still alive. How do you feel about that? Disrespecting Clyde Tombaugh. And I said, this is how you need to think about it. No, Clyde Tombaugh did not discover the ninth planet. What does it mean to discover the ninth of something you already have 8 of, and it's the most diminutive one at that? Is that something to celebrate?
Well,
Maybe so. However, I've got something better to celebrate. Let's celebrate the fact that he discovered the first of a new class of object in the solar system. That is a much greater discovery than simply saying, I discovered the 9th one. Oh yeah, it's littler than everything else. It's one of the biggest members of the Kuiper Belt. And I think it's happier there. It's the king of the comets. Instead of being like the puniest planet. So what I thought about at the time was that this is the greatest thing we could do for Pluto, is give it a whole new class of object in the solar system, a new swath of real estate to explore. And that was the point of view that I took and my colleagues here took at the museum. And we smiled, not knowing how many people we would piss off for that. Okay. Thank you for your question. Next question, yes.
2 questions.
She says she has 2 questions.
Yeah,
Should we give her
just
2 questions?
Okay.
Should we?
It's really small questions.
Okay.
All right.
It's never the length of the question, it's the length of the answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Pluto.
Yes.
Do you feel that one day it will drop out of sight? And is there any other, like, similar, not planets, clusters behind Pluto that we haven't discovered yet?
Okay, you all get that question. So first, will Pluto ever drop out of sight? Number one. Number two, is there more to be discovered in the outer solar system that might, let me add to your question, that might force us to further rethink what's going on in the outer solar system? So I'll answer those. First, Pluto's size has settled out in our estimates of it, but it is more than half made of ice. So in enough time, it's possible for all of the ice to evaporate and it just gets littler and littler, laying bare its rocky core. Then it's something else. It's likely that many of the asteroids were once ice. But what's left over is what's there once all the ice evaporated from sunlight. So, but right now, its size is stable. But it doesn't get that close to the sun to generate huge tails. But if Pluto came to where Earth is right now, heat from the sun would evaporate that ice, and it would grow a tail. That'd be just embarrassing. You couldn't be that if you want to be a planet. You just don't want that. You can't be a planet with a tail. You know that. So, now, as far as the outer solar system goes, if an object is self-luminous, generates its own light, its brightness will drop off as the square of the distance. So it's twice as far away, it's 1/4 as bright. 3 times as far away, 1/9 as bright. All right, I'm there, we're together. If the object reflects sunlight, and you start moving it farther away, it drops off as 1 over the distance to the 4th power. It gets dim very, very quickly. So there could be large objects out there, maybe the size of Neptune, we don't know. Maybe beyond the Kuiper Belt, because it would have really disturbed the Kuiper Belt if it had if there's like way out there, we just don't know. Our telescopes aren't that powerful to see them, so we don't know. But we're pretty sure we got the Kuiper Belt figured out, its extent and its range and what the objects are doing. So good question, thanks. Yes?
In a bit of a more personal question, do you ever get depressed knowing all the amazing creative ways the universe can squish all the life on Earth?
Oh, so the question is, do I have bouts of depression knowing firsthand all the ways the universe wants to kill us? I mean, I paraphrase, but that's basically what you're asking. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Actually, all those ways the universe can kill us, black holes, becoming spaghettified as you are drawn into a black hole, asteroid impacts, gamma ray burst, they're all vastly more exciting than getting hit by a bus, okay? So, I mean, my other book before this is called Death by Black Hole. The title chapter of a section titled, the section was called, When the Universe Turns Bad, All the Ways the Cosmos Wants to Kill Us. And it's a fascinating subject. People happen to be really curious about death, morbidly so. I'm sitting there on the airplane minding my own business. They look over, see I do astrophysics, then out come the questions. It's not, oh, tell me about how big the sun is, or tell me how beautiful the night sky is. No, it's when will the sun explode? Will Earth tip on its axis? Will the black hole eat us? Will the Big Bang? Will the thing? Will 2012? Will we survive 2012? That's all they care about. That's all they care about. So no, I don't get depressed at all. I find it rather illuminating. Because I know I'm going to die one day. Let it be spectacular if I have that choice. So that's why. Okay.
Thank you.
And before you go, let me just, you're here, just 2012. Let's understand something, okay? Just for the moment. Give me a minute, just. If you Google 2012, there's like thousands of websites telling you the world is going to end on the solstice, December 21st, 2012. And you look, well, why? Something I missed? Like what? Like I was just here and then now the world is going to end? First of all, nearly all cults owe their success to proclamations that the world will end in the lifetime of the leader of that cult. Just check it out. They all have doomsday scenarios in the lifetime of the leader of the cult. That makes you more compelled to join the cult, because the cult has ways to avoid the death, okay? Now, that's for starters. So, one of the statements will say is that on that day, December 21st, the center of the galaxy, where there's a black hole, the sun and the earth will come into exact alignment. And there's the worry that that extra gravity will like knock Earth off its axis. You can calculate what that extra gravity will be. From that calculation, you know nothing's going to happen to Earth, but that doesn't convince people. because we're just the pointy-headed intellectual scientists. Why believe us about science? So, what do we know? So, let's hold the calculation aside for the moment. It is true that the center of the galaxy, the sun and the Earth, will come into perfect alignment on the solstice, December 2012. That's true. What they don't tell you is that that perfect alignment happens every December 21st. They left that out. They forgot to tell you. One other thing. I know you're waiting there in line, but hang on. Got to get this off my chest. Remember I said Percival Lowell is looking for Planet X? Tombaugh discovers Pluto, but it's not Planet X? Doesn't have enough mass? Did you wonder whatever happened to the Planet X? Did I tell you what happened to it? Okay, so people kept looking, decade after decade, because Pluto was not Planet X. Didn't have near the gravity to do what it should have been doing to Neptune. So, took to the 1990s for a clever astronomer, said, well, let me look at the data that's telling us that Neptune is misbehaving. He found a telescope responsible for a branch of the data, for a section of the data, because you're getting data over multiple telescopes, over multiple generations to determine this. He looked at the observing log of that telescope and found out that right before certain observations of Neptune were made, the guy opened the gearbox and then put it back together again. Interfered with the machinery of the data-taking device. He said, I wonder if that would make a difference. So he took those data and removed them from the fit of the equation. Just removed it. And used all the other telescopes. And when he did this, Neptune landed smack dab on Newton's laws. Planet X was a phantom all along. Today, all gravity is present and accounted for in the solar system. All important gravity. There is no unseen objects messing with anything else that we can't account for. Which means on those same 2012 websites where they talk about Planet X, they're talking about some planet, like Nibiru, or there's some name they give it. This Planet X exists in the mind of the people who write those websites and nowhere else. The world will be here before, during, and after 2012, I promise. Next question.
Was the criteria of domination of your orbital zone the most substantial criteria in demoting Pluto as a planet?
Yes. Was the criterion of dominating your orbital zone the most significant? There it is. That's, if you can't control your neighborhood, and by the way, initially when that was written, it was thought that you would just absorb all the objects, you would vacuum them up with your gravity. I'm using vacuum loosely there, obviously. Your gravity would attract, and it just clean it out. Later, it's learned that the distances between many of these pieces may be so large that you would never come close enough for it to hit and be absorbed into your physical body. But it is possible, if you have a strong enough gravity, to deflect them out of the zone. Your gravity can actually serve as like a tennis racket. Something comes by, you just knock it out. So you can clean your zone gravitationally without ever having to be smacked by what's orbiting there. And Pluto can't even do that. By the way, Earth plows through 200, 300 tons of meteors a day. Earth would do that. If Earth did that for 1 trillion years, the mass of the Earth would grow by like 0.1%. So basically, we're in charge of our zone, all right? 200 tons sounds like a lot, not to the Earth, all right? If it landed on you, that would be bad. But you are littler than the Earth, okay? That's how that works. So yeah, that's your question. Thanks.
Before you worked here, did the museum believe that Pluto was a planet?
Oh.
Because on the chart of the planets, they had Neptune as the last planet.
On which chart?
In the museum.
Well, oh, actually, not in this museum. The Hayden Planetarium was built and opened to the public in 1935, after Pluto was discovered, and was widely believed to be a planet. So all accounting of the solar system included Pluto. In Chicago, the Adler Planetarium, the first planetarium in the United States, Hayden was not the first, although we got very famous very quickly. Among other things, we launched what became Sky and Telescope magazine in our basement. Okay? It was the magazine called The Sky, merged with another one called The Telescope. So we had a lot of ways to become well known at the time. In Chicago, they built and designed their facility and opened in the year 1930. And there's in the foyer, the entryway of their main building, there are 8 plaques of the 8 planets in the solar system. So they got it wrong, but now it's right again. See, that's how that works. And that they're not the only ones who had it wrong and then got it right. Gustav Holst, the composer, composed The Planets in 19 teens. I think he finished it in 1921, before Pluto was discovered. There's a movement for each planet, no Pluto. Pluto got discovered, they say, hey, you want to add one in? He started it, said, no, I'm not interested. Then a Holst scholar, scholars like really study the work of the person, composed a Pluto movement to add to it. Did that about 10 years ago. But now, what's he doing? What's going on there? By the way, on the periodic table of elements, uranium is named after Uranus. Neptunium is named after Neptune. Plutonium is named after Pluto. Named on false pretense, by the way, because we had a run of planets there, and there it was, got the name. So we always had Pluto until 2000. The Adler Planetarium never had Pluto. And then they did, but now they have to retract it. So there you go. A quickie, closer to home, you've all been on Fifth Avenue, Rockefeller Center. That side of Rockefeller Center is Atlas. Okay, you've seen Atlas? You've been there? If you look at the yoke across his back, as an artist, you try to represent the universe somehow, because Atlas is holding up, not the Earth, I think it was, the world, the known world. So the whole universe is on his back. So how do you represent that? Well, there's this sort of grid, this spherical grid, but the yoke that supports that grid has the symbols for the planets. Mercury, Venus, the hand mirror, Earth with the longitude and latitude line, Mars with the circle with the arrow on it. It goes all the way around, and then like Neptune, it goes right on up to Neptune. And there's no Pluto. Pluto wasn't discovered when that sculpture was cast, was designed and then later cast. So it's another one of these places where Pluto is absent. Yes?
Since Pluto has another moon that's almost the same size of it, wouldn't that make another category of planets? Because it's almost like 2 dwarf planets orbiting each other.
Yes!
That's simple.
If I were Pope of nomenclature, my nomenclature would have a category of planet where you have double planets. And in the case of Pluto and Charon, they are so close to each other in size that the point around which they orbit is in the space between them. Ooh. For all other planets and their moons, you still always go around your center of mass. You're never going around the center of the host planet, so it's over a little bit. It's always within the physical body of the principal object. So Earth and the moon, our center of mass is about 1,000 miles beneath the Earth's surface, but it's still within the Earth. It's not out in space. So I would like to see a category of solar system object that are double planets. That would be cool. I'd like to see a category of planets that are within the green zone of a solar system, where you might find liquid water. I'd like to see a category of planets that just simply has rings, a category of planets that has atmospheres, a category of planets that has active volcanoes. These are cuts through the data where you can pick and choose what to talk about in one breath. And in that way, understand the nature of the solar system. And at no time are you sitting down memorizing by rote something. That's why we got so angry, because we believed that there was something mythical about the number 9, and that number gets changed, and we find it as an assault on who and what we are, because that defined the science in our heads. Where had it been taught differently from the beginning, the number wouldn't have made any difference to us at all. So I agree. Thank you for that question.
Hi.
Hello.
So, looking outside of Pluto, but back to your hope to have the entire world look at the sky, if you have everybody look through a telescope, what would be your cliff notes or your tricks for them to know what they're looking at? The difference between planets, stars, asteroids, and comets at a glance.
We actually thought this through. The 10 days, I think it's 10 days, in April, are days where the phase of the moon is especially beautiful in a telescope, where planets are nicely positioned in the twilight sky, where certain constellations are visible. So there's a combination of objects that are nicely configured for one-stop shopping of a telescope session that you might have. And that's not true for all times of the year. You'd have to wait some in the evening and some in the early morning hours. So, and if you own a telescope, chances are you own a good telescope, chances are you know what you're looking at and you know how to point it. And some of the most friendly people you will ever meet is a person on the street with a telescope, because they're in love with the universe. And as Carl Sagan once said, when you're in love, you want to tell the world. And they're out there to just share the love. So they'll be there with. Now, you're wondering, suppose there's like not an astronomer in a village and the teacher gets a telescope and doesn't know how to use it. That's a problem. I mean, we have to like work that one. So I think it's more a goal than a reality. I think it's a noble goal, a noble goal. The telescope enabled us to understand our place in the universe like no other instrument. And so we're going to work, we're going to see if we can make it happen.
I hope it does.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. This looks like it's the last question, which puts great pressure on you for the depth and breadth of what will come out of your mouth.
Well, I'm not even going to try to top all the other students' questions because they clearly are better studies. But as my favorite public science, kind of face of science right now, personality, I wonder.
You mean me?
You.
Oh, well, thank you.
You
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you. Uh-huh.
No, I think you've just done such a great deal in such a
By the
short
way,
period
can
of
I
time.
interject something there?
Sure.
I've done the statistics on this. 85% of my public exposure on television and media is driven by producers where like the universe flinches and they need a soundbite. They come to me. I'm not twisting their arms. It's like 15% is where there's a book that comes out and you get sort of levered into a talk show or something. But most of them, I'm minding my own business in my office and they call, which for me is a statement, a testament to the public's appetite for the cosmos, that it happens without me trying to force it on them. So however, when you see me, it's really the compliment to what the demand that the public has for this material. So go on.
Exactly. I think the demand is great. I agree. And with your prospects with NASA and all that, I think that you are the face
My
of
prospects
science.
with that? What are you talking
Well, but I mean, basically,
about? You mean the
going on
rumor
is
that you're
the
talking
rumor.
about? The rumor.
But basically, you are the face of science
rumor.
for a lot of people.
Do you know this rumor? It's one of these. It's true that it's a rumor. That doesn't mean that the rumor is true. See, that's what it is. I've been rumored to be on a list to be head of NASA. And yeah, but my feelings on that, not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you, my feelings on that is we all love NASA. We all care for NASA. We all want it to succeed. Question is, where are my efforts best invoked in the service of NASA? Is it as head of this ship called NASA, or is it, if I'm not in NASA, then I can still do the TV and I still write books and they publish my op-eds. I have access to the public who then has sentiment in favor of NASA that can influence lawmakers. So I think in the end, I mean, I'm not bucking for the job. There are people who would love that job. I'm not among them, but I see my name in the list. So I'm flattered and honored, but it's not like I'm after it. So I keep interrupting. So your question is, sorry.
Yeah, my question is extremely important. That's why we need to get to it.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. But no, because you are now the public face of science, I just wonder what you consider is your favorite, based purely on charisma or personality, your favorite past public face of science. You know, be it Sagan or Burke or Arthur C. Clarke and who else?
Okay, well, that's an easy question. I thought you had a hard
And
question.
why?
And why? Show all work, yes. Okay, yes, teacher, okay. Yes, Mrs. McGillicuddy, I'll show all work. So thank you for that question. There's no doubt at all. I'll end on this answer because it's the right place to end. There is no doubt at all that so much of what I do professionally, in the eyes of the public, exists in this swath, cut in a roughened field by Carl Sagan. There's no question about it. Practically every thought I've ever had about reaching the public, he's had before me and written on it and done it. And so I'm here just simply time shifted from him, but in fact there's very little that I'm doing that is sort of unique in the history of people's attempts to reach the public. It's just not. Yes, there are different, the media is different, right? There's Jon Stewart rather than Johnny Carson, There are things, there's certain different channels, yes, but the activity, the motivation for the activity is identical. It's identical. Now, I think Carl Sagan did it better than anyone before him, or even since. Part of it was, yeah, he had charisma, he was brilliant. What a main difference between us is that he actually had a scientific agenda, okay? He basically single-handedly created a brand new field of science called astrobiology. And he did this with he put it into his work, in his writings. And I don't have I'm really just a servant of the community's collective interest. So when you read my writings, any one of us could have written that. It's not just my view. It's really a consensus view. So that's one difference. But what I want to leave you with is, you asked me why. Why would I cite him? When I was in high school, kid in high school, I went to the Bronx High School of Science. Yeah. Okay. Bronx in the house. Yes, we got Bronx in the house. A storied school. School got 7 Nobel Prize winners came out of that school, all in physics, by the way. My most formative years of my life were spent in that school. I applied to colleges. Carl Sagan is professor at Cornell. I applied to Cornell. I'm accepted at Cornell. Within 2 weeks, I get a letter from Carl Sagan. I'm 17 years old. I said, Carl Sagan, from Johnny Carson, the Tonight Show host at the time, Johnny Carson, could this be him? I opened it up. It said, the admissions office forwarded me your application. It was clear to them that you have a deep interest in the universe, which I've had since I was 9 years old, since my first visit to the Hayden Planetarium. So, he said, if you're still wondering what school you might attend, if you'd like to visit Cornell, I'd be happy to host your visit. Just let me know, and I'll show you the labs. So I can't even, it's like I can't, Mom, what do you do with that letter? So we arrange a trip, take a bus up to Ithaca. It's in the winter, because that's when they tell you when you're accepted, is in the winter. It's cold. Okay, he meets me out front of the lab, invites me in. I'm in his office. He reaches back and pulls out, this was the coolest thing, just reach back. one of his books, right? Just reaches back, signs it to me. I still have this book. Who am I? I'm just some kid. Who am I to him? I'm nothing to him. Not really, but then I found out maybe I was everything to him. We spent the day walking around. He showed me the lab. We were done, drove me back to the bus station. It starts to snow. He says, I worry the bus might not get through. Here's my home phone. If the bus doesn't get through, call, spend the night at our home. To this day, when students email me, call me, send me a notice, I stop everything. I might have email from like the head of the museum, my provost, that goes on the side. Because I swore after that moment that if I were ever as important or as famous as Carl Sagan, that I sure as hell would be treating students in the next generation the way he treated me. And that's why. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
For more information on Neil deGrasse Tyson, author of The Pluto Files, visit HaydenPlanetarium.org